A millionaire finds a 6-year-old girl kneeling on the cold floor of his company's meeting room. With a firm voice and a cleaning cloth in her hands, she explains that she is there to cover for her seriously ill mother. The man bursts into tears and, touched by the child's seriousness and vulnerability, makes a decision that changes both their lives forever. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel, don't forget to like this video, and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The rain poured relentlessly over Boston's skyline as Maxwell Thornton's sleek black Bentley glided through the flooded streets. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the November downpour, creating a hypnotic rhythm that matched the emptiness inside him. At 52, Maxwell had amassed more wealth than most could dream of. His company, Thornton Development, dominated the East Coast real estate market with ruthless efficiency. "Mr. Thornton, the board expects your decision by tomorrow morning." His assistant's voice crackled through the car's speaker system. "The Fairfield Heights project needs your final approval." "Tell them it's done," Maxwell replied flatly, his eyes fixed on the rain-soaked road. "I'll sign off tonight." Another luxury development, another billion-dollar deal. The numbers that once excited him now felt hollow, mere entries in spreadsheets that measured a success he no longer felt. His phone buzzed with notifications, emails from executives, messages from business partners, reminders of meetings he couldn't remember scheduling. As the Bentley turned onto Harrison Avenue, the gleaming towers of downtown gave way to weathered, brick buildings. Maxwell rarely ventured into this part of the city, a neglected neighborhood slated for revitalization under one of his company's numerous projects. His driver had taken this detour to avoid traffic, a decision Maxwell would have normally criticized. Today, he merely stared through the window, barely registering the dilapidated surroundings. The car slowed near a partially collapsed apartment building where emergency vehicles had created a barricade. Construction equipment bearing the Thornton Development logo stood idle in the rain. Maxwell's jaw tightened. This was supposed to be completed months ago, another luxury condominium complex, replacing what the company's marketing materials called outdated housing. That's when he heard it, a high-pitched scream cutting through the downpour. A small figure darted between the vehicles, arms waving frantically. "Stop the car," Maxwell ordered, surprising himself. "Sir, we're already running late for your—" "I said stop the car!" The Bentley halted abruptly. Without grabbing an umbrella, Maxwell stepped out into the deluge, his custom-tailored Armani suit immediately soaking through. The cold rain felt almost satisfying against his skin, a physical sensation piercing through his emotional numbness. A young girl, no more than 9 years old, stood before him, drenched and trembling. Her dark hair clung to her pale face, eyes wide with desperation. "Please help," she pleaded, her voice barely audible above the storm. "My brother, he can't breathe right, please." Maxwell stood frozen, water streaming down his face. Something in her expression, raw fear mixed with fierce determination, struck him like a physical blow. "Where is he?" Maxwell heard himself asking. The girl pointed toward the partially condemned building. "Third floor. The stairs are still." "Okay, on the east side." Maxwell turned to his driver. "Call an ambulance." "Sir, this neighborhood isn't safe. Let me—" "Stay with the car. Call an ambulance," Maxwell repeated firmly, already following the girl who was running back toward the building. They climbed crumbling stairs, past walls marked with eviction notices bearing his company's letterhead. The girl moved with the confident navigation of someone who had made this journey countless times, leading Maxwell through a maze of half-demolished corridors. "In here," she said, pushing open a door hanging from one hinge. The apartment was barely habitable. Rain leaked through cracks in the ceiling, forming puddles on the warped floor. In the corner, a makeshift bed constructed from blankets held a tiny figure. Maxwell approached slowly. Kneeling beside what he now saw was an infant, perhaps 10 months old, burning with fever yet shivering violently. "His name is Oliver," the girl said, kneeling opposite Maxwell. "I'm Emma. Our mum went to find help. 3 days ago, she hasn't come back." Maxwell placed his hand on the baby's forehead, feeling heat radiate through his palm. The infant's breathing came in shallow, labored gasps. Without thinking, Maxwell removed his cashmere suit jacket, a $6,000 garment he'd purchased without a second thought, and wrapped it gently around the child. "How long has he been like this?" Maxwell asked, carefully lifting the bundled infant. "Since yesterday," Emma replied, her small hands adjusting the expensive fabric around her brother's tiny form. "He stopped crying this morning. That's when I got scared." Maxwell cradled the baby against his chest, feeling the rapid heartbeat. "We're going to help him," he said, surprised by the conviction in his voice. "Both of you." They descended the stairs carefully, Emma leading the way with the flashlight from Maxwell's phone. The rain had intensified, turning the street into a shallow river. Maxwell tucked the baby further into his jacket, shielding him from the downpour as they rushed toward the waiting Bentley. "Sir, the ambulance is stuck in traffic," the driver reported, eyes widening at the sight of the children. "They say it could be 40 minutes. Maxwell made an immediate decision that would alter the course of his life. "Take us to my house now, and call Dr. Bennett. Tell him to meet us there. It's an emergency." As the Bentley navigated through Boston's flooded streets, Maxwell held the feverish infant, while Emma sat beside him, her small hand resting protectively on her brother's blanket. His phone rang incessantly, board members, executives, his assistant reminding him of the crucial meeting he was now missing. Maxwell silenced the device without a glance. The car turned onto Beacon Hill, where 19th-century brownstones housed Boston's elite. Maxwell's residence, a meticulously restored mansion, stood apart from its neighbors, imposing and solitary, much like its owner. As they pulled into the circular driveway, the ornate iron gates closing behind them, Maxwell looked down at the children he had brought into his pristine world. Emma gazed up at the mansion with wide eyes. "Is this where you live?" "Yes," Maxwell replied, leading her toward the entrance. "And you'll stay here until your brother gets better." The housekeeper, Mrs. Sullivan, opened the door, her practiced composure faltering at the sight before her. "Mr. Thornton?" "Prepare the guest room next to mine," Maxwell instructed, carrying Oliver inside. "And find some dry clothes for Emma." "Of course, sir," Mrs. Sullivan replied, quickly recovering. "Dr. Bennett called to say he's on his way." The grand foyer, with its marble floors and crystal chandelier, seemed to swallow Emma as she stood dripping on the imported Italian tiles. Maxwell led her upstairs to a bedroom larger than the entire apartment they had just left. "This will be your room for now," he said, gently placing Oliver on the king-sized bed. "Mrs. Sullivan will find you something dry to wear." Emma didn't move from Oliver's side. "He's very hot," Maxwell nodded, feeling the baby's forehead again. "The doctor will be here soon." As if summoned by his words, the doorbell rang. Moments later, Dr. Bennett entered the room, medical bag in hand. He was Maxwell's personal physician, a man accustomed to treating executive stress and minor ailments, not critically ill children. "Maxwell," Dr. Bennett greeted him with surprise. "What's happening here?" "This baby needs help," Maxwell replied simply. "His name is Oliver." Dr. Bennett's professional demeanor took over as he examined the infant, his expression growing increasingly concerned. "Severe pneumonia, dehydration. He needs to be in a hospital." "Can you treat him here?" Maxwell asked. "I have everything you need." The doctor hesitated. "With the right equipment, yes, but order whatever you need. I'll pay for everything. Nurses, equipment, medication, whatever it takes." Dr. Bennett studied Maxwell's face, searching for an explanation for this uncharacteristic behavior. Finding none, he simply nodded. "I'll make the arrangements." As the doctor made calls, Maxwell turned to find Emma watching him intently, her small face solemn and assessing. "Why are you helping us?" she asked directly, with a child's uncomplicated curiosity. Maxwell opened his mouth to respond but found no ready answer. Why had he stopped? Why had he brought these children into his home? The question hung between them as the rain continued to lash against the windows of his mansion. In the adjacent room, his phone rang again. The board, his executive team, the investors waiting for decisions that would affect thousands of lives. For the first time in decades, Maxwell Thornton let the calls go unanswered as something long dormant within him stirred to life. Chapter 2. Awakening. Dawn broke over. Boston, painting the skyline in soft hues of pink and gold. Maxwell hadn't slept. He sat in an armchair beside the bed, where Oliver lay connected to an IV and oxygen monitor, equipment that Dr. Bennett had arranged to be delivered and installed within hours. The soft beeping of the machines provided a rhythmic backdrop to the storm of thoughts whirling through Maxwell's mind. "His fever's breaking," Dr. Bennett said, entering the room with quiet efficiency. "The antibiotics are working, but he's not out of danger yet. The next 24 hours will be critical." Maxwell nodded, his eyes fixed on the tiny figure beneath the pristine sheets. "And after that?" "With continued treatment, he should recover fully." "But Maxwell," the doctor hesitated, lowering his voice, "we need to address the legal implications here. These children are under my protection," Maxwell interrupted firmly. "For now, that's all that matters." Dr. Bennett studied his long-time patient with new interest. In 15 years of serving as Maxwell Thornton's physician, he had never seen this expression on the businessman's face, a mixture of determination and something resembling tenderness. "I've arranged for a pediatric nurse to stay with him round the clock," the doctor said finally. "She'll be here within the hour." "Thank you, James. Send me the bills directly." Left alone with the sleeping infant, Maxwell found himself doing something he hadn't done in years, reflecting on his past. The baby's labored breathing triggered memories he had buried beneath layers of acquisition reports and profit margins. A different hospital room, a different child, a meeting he couldn't miss. "Mr. Thornton," Mrs. Sullivan's voice pulled him from the memory. "The little girl is awake. She's asking about her brother." Maxwell rose, straightening his wrinkled shirt. He had changed from his rain-soaked suit, but hadn't bothered with his usual immaculate appearance. "I'll speak with her." He found Emma sitting cross-legged on the guest room bed, wearing what appeared to be one of Mrs. Sullivan's old T-shirts, comically large on her. Small frame. Her dark hair had been brushed and pulled back into a neat ponytail. At Maxwell's entrance, she immediately stood up. "Is Oliver okay?" she asked, her voice small but direct. "He's improving," Maxwell replied, trying to soften his typically authoritative tone. "The doctor says the medicine is working." Relief flooded the child's face, and for the first time, Maxwell noticed details he had missed in the chaos of the previous night. Her deep brown eyes, intelligent and watchful, the slight gap between her front teeth, the faint freckles across her nose. "Are you hungry?" he asked. Emma nodded hesitantly. "Mrs. Sullivan has prepared breakfast. Would you like to join me downstairs?" The kitchen, a showcase of stainless steel and marble that Maxwell rarely entered, felt suddenly warm and inviting as Mrs. Sullivan busied herself preparing pancakes. Emma sat at the counter, her legs dangling from the high stool, watching the housekeeper with fascination. "Do you like blueberries, dear?" Mrs. Sullivan asked, already sprinkling them into the batter. Emma nodded, more animated than Maxwell had seen her. "They're my favorite." Maxwell's phone vibrated insistently. Victor Reed, his chief operating officer and right-hand man for the past decade. With a quick motion, he silenced it again. "Mr. Thornton," Mrs. Sullivan said, placing a steaming plate before him. "Your office has called 6 times this morning. Miss Parker said it's urgent regarding the Fairfield Heights project." Maxwell felt Emma's eyes on him. "I'll call back later," he said, picking up his fork. "Let's have breakfast first." The domesticity of the moment struck him as surreal. Sitting in his kitchen, eating pancakes with a child he had met less than 12 hours ago, while the corporate empire he had built waited on decisions he suddenly couldn't bring himself to make. "These are really good," Emma said between mouthfuls, her initial reserve melting slightly. "Our mum used to make pancakes on Sundays, but not with real blueberries." The casual mention of her mother opened a door. "Emma," Maxwell began carefully, "where is your mother now?" The girl's fork paused mid-air. She set it down slowly, her eyes dropping to her plate. "She went to find help when Oliver got sick. She said she'd come back, but her voice trailed off. And your father? Emma shrugged, the gesture heartbreakingly adult for such a young child. Never knew him. It's always been just me, Mom, and Oliver. How did you end up in that building? It wasn't safe. A shadow crossed Emma's face. We had an apartment in Fairfield Heights. Then men came with papers saying everyone had to leave. Mom said some big company bought everything and was going to tear it all down. Maxwell felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. Fairfield Heights, his company's latest acquisition, a distressed property purchased for a fraction of its potential value, once redeveloped into luxury condominiums. The other building was the only place Mom could find. Emma continued, oblivious to Maxwell's growing discomfort. She said it was just temporary until she could find a job. Then Oliver got sick. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of rain against the windows and the distant beeping of Oliver's monitors upstairs. Maxwell's mind raced, connecting pieces of a puzzle he had never bothered to examine, the human cost of decisions made in boardrooms, of properties acquired and demolished, of lives disrupted in the name of progress and profit. Mr. Thornton? Emma's voice pulled him back to the present. When will we have to leave? The question caught him off guard. Leave? When Oliver gets better, where will we go? The simple inquiry carried the weight of adult concerns. Maxwell found himself unprepared for the surge of protectiveness that rose within him. You don't have to worry about that right now, he said, surprising himself with the gentleness in his voice. You're safe here, both of you. Emma studied him with that same searching look she had given him the night before, as though trying to determine if his words could be trusted. Before she could respond, the doorbell rang. Mrs. Sullivan returned moments later, her expression troubled. Mr. Thornton, Mr. Reed is here. He says it's urgent. Maxwell sighed. Victor's presence meant the outside world, his real world, could no longer be held at bay. Show him to my study, I'll be there shortly. Turning to Emma, he found himself reluctant to end their conversation. Would you like to see your brother? The nurse should have arrived by now. Emma nodded eagerly, sliding off the stool. As they walked upstairs together, Maxwell was struck by how small she was, how vulnerable. Yet there was a resilience about her, a quiet strength that belied her years. The pediatric nurse, a kind-faced woman introduced as Ms. Chen, was adjusting Oliver's IV when they entered the room. Emma immediately went to her brother's side, her hand gently touching his. His fever is down to 101, Ms. Chen reported. Much better than the 104 he came in with. He's responding well to the antibiotics. When will he wake up? Emma asked anxiously. Soon, sweetheart. He needs rest to heal, but he's getting stronger. Maxwell watched the interaction, aware of a strange sensation in his chest, an ache both painful and somehow necessary, like a limb regaining feeling after being numb. I need to speak with my colleague, he told Emma. Will you be all right here with Ms. Chen and Oliver? Emma nodded, already settling into the chair beside her brother's bed. Maxwell found himself hesitating at the door, reluctant to return to the world waiting in his study. Victor Reed was pacing the Persian rug when Maxwell entered. At 45, Victor projected the sharp efficiency that had made him invaluable to Thornton Development and to Maxwell personally. His tailored suit and perfectly knotted tie stood in stark contrast to Maxwell's rumpled appearance. Max, what the hell is going on? Victor demanded, dispensing with pleasantries. The board is waiting for your signature on Fairfield. The investors are getting nervous. Something's come up, Maxwell replied, moving to his desk. Something more. Important than the biggest deal of the quarter? Victor's tone was incredulous. The demolition crews are on standby. Every day we delay costs thousands. Maxwell's gaze drifted to the window, where he could see rain still falling on the garden below. There were still people living in those buildings, Victor. Former residents, Victor corrected, his impatience evident. All legal evictions, all by the book. We've been over this. There's a woman, Maxwell said slowly. She has 2 children. They were living in one of the condemned buildings because they had nowhere else to go after being evicted from Fairfield. Victor's expression shifted from irritation to wariness. What are you saying, Max? I'm saying I want to review the Fairfield acquisition, all of it, the eviction process, the relocation assistance. That's already been handled by legal. Victor cut in sharply. Everything was compliant with city regulations. We're not running a charity here, Max. We're running a business. The words pragmatic, rational, exactly what Maxwell himself would have said 24 hours ago, now rang hollow. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from Ms. Chen. "Baby awake and alert, asking for you." Maxwell rose from his desk. "I need to handle something. We'll continue this discussion later." Victor stepped forward, blocking his path. "Max, what's going on with you? First you disappear during the most critical phase of Fairfield, then you miss the board meeting. Now you're questioning a deal that's been in the works for months. The board is starting to ask questions." "Let them ask," Maxwell replied, moving, past him toward the door. "And delay the demolition at Fairfield. I want a full review of the relocation assistance provided to the residents." "You can't be serious." Maxwell paused, turning back to face his COO. "I've never been more serious, Victor. And one more thing. I want all the files on the family that lived in apartment 3B at Fairfield Heights. A woman with 2 children, a girl named Emma, about 9 years old, and a baby named Oliver." He left Victor standing in the study, confusion and calculation warring on his face. As Maxwell climbed the stairs toward the room where the children waited, he felt something shift within him, the first tremors of a foundation beginning to crack. Chapter 3. Shifting Foundations. 3 days passed in a strange new rhythm. Maxwell found himself dividing his time between conference calls taken from his home office and hours spent in the guest room where Oliver was steadily recovering. The infant's improvement was remarkable, the pallor replaced by healthy color, the labored breathing giving way to normal sleep, occasionally punctuated by small, reassuring cries. Maxwell had expected to feel relief as the crisis passed. Instead, he felt something more complicated, a growing attachment he hadn't anticipated. "His lungs are sounding much clearer," Dr. Bennett announced during his morning visit. "The antibiotics have done their job. He'll need continued care and observation, but the immediate danger has passed." "That's wonderful news," Maxwell said, watching as Emma, who rarely left her brother's side, broke into a wide smile. "What happens now?" Dr. Bennett asked quietly, following Maxwell into the hallway. It was the question Maxwell had been avoiding. The practical answer was clear. With Oliver recovering, there was no longer any medical justification for keeping the children in his home. The logical next step would be to contact child services, to find their mother, or failing that, to place them with appropriate authorities. Yet the thought filled him with a nameless dread. "I need more time," Maxwell replied, surprising himself. "There's something I need to look into first." Returning to his study, Maxwell found himself facing a mountain of documents. He had demanded complete files on the Fairfield Heights acquisition, not the sanitized executive summaries he usually reviewed, but the raw paperwork, eviction notices, tenant communications, relocation records. "Sir," his assistant's voice came through the speaker, "the board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow. Mr. Reed says your presence is non-negotiable. Tell them I'll be there," Maxwell replied, his attention focused on a spreadsheet detailing compensation offered to displaced Fairfield residents. The figures were technically legal, but insultingly inadequate, barely enough for security deposits on new apartments, much less moving costs or the inevitable rent increases in Boston's overheated market. No wonder Emma's mother had been forced to find shelter in a condemned building. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Emma stood in the doorway, looking less guarded than she had days before. "Mrs. Sullivan said I should tell you. Lunch is ready," she said, "and Ms. Chen says Oliver can come downstairs for a little while." Maxwell glanced at his watch, surprised to find it was already past noon. "I'll be right there." As he followed Emma to the dining room, Maxwell was struck by how quickly the child had adapted to her surroundings. The wariness remained, but there were moments, like now, as she skipped down the hallway, when her natural childhood exuberance broke through. In the dining room, Mrs. Sullivan had prepared a simple lunch of soup and sandwiches. Ms. Chen was already seated, holding Oliver, who looked around with bright, curious eyes. "Look who's feeling better," Maxwell said, approaching the baby with a smile he didn't have to force. Oliver gurgled in response, his tiny hand reaching out to grab Maxwell's offered finger. The simple gesture sent an unexpected wave of emotion through Maxwell, a memory surfacing from the depths. Another small hand, another trusting grip. "Mr. Thornton," Ms. Chen's voice pulled him back. "Would you like to hold him?" Before he could respond, she was transferring the baby into his arms. Oliver settled against his chest, a warm, solid weight that felt simultaneously foreign and familiar. "You're a natural," Mrs. Sullivan remarked, setting down a bowl of soup. Maxwell didn't correct her. There was nothing natural about this, a corporate titan cradling a stranger's child in his dining room, ignoring calls from board members and investors to do so. Yet as Oliver's eyes drifted closed, his small body relaxing trustingly against Maxwell's chest, nothing had ever felt more right. Lunch passed in comfortable conversation, primarily between Mrs. Sullivan and Emma, who was gradually opening up about her interests, books, particularly stories about animals, drawing, which she claimed to be not very good at, but I like it anyway, and music, which lit up her face when mentioned. "I used to sing in a choir at school," she said, her voice growing wistful. "Before we had to move. We have a piano," Maxwell found himself saying, "in the conservatory. Perhaps Mrs. Sullivan could show you after lunch." Emma's eyes widened. A real piano, could I? The afternoon found Maxwell working from the conservatory, a light-filled room he rarely used, while Emma cautiously explored the grand piano. Her small fingers pressed the keys experimentally, eyes brightening at each note. "My teacher said I had a good ear," she said, picking out a simple melody. Maxwell looked up from his laptop. "Did you have lessons?" Emma shook her head. "Mom couldn't afford them, but my music teacher at school let me stay after sometimes." As Maxwell returned to his email, the tentative notes gradually formed into a recognizable tune. "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," played slowly, but with surprising accuracy for a child with no formal training. The melody transported Maxwell, back 15 years, to another child at another piano. His son Nathan had shown the same natural affinity for music. Maxwell had promised piano lessons, but always later, when the newest project was complete, when the latest acquisition was finalized. Later had never come. His reverie was interrupted by his phone buzzing with Victor's name on the screen. "Maxwell," Victor's voice was tense. "We need to talk. I've been reviewing the files you requested on the Fairfield evictions." Maxwell stepped out of the conservatory, closing the door to keep the conversation private. "And there are irregularities. The relocation assistance figures on the executive summary don't match the actual disbursements. And the timeline for the eviction notices. Some residents received less than the legally required notice." Maxwell's grip tightened on the phone. "How many?" "At least 30 families," Victor admitted, "including your Jane Doe in 3B. "Her name is Catherine Miller," Maxwell replied, recalling the file he had reviewed that morning. "Not Jane Doe." Victor sighed. "Max, I understand you're concerned, but this needs to be handled carefully. If word gets out about these irregularities..." "Who was responsible?" Maxwell interrupted. A pause. "The Fairfield acquisition was delegated to the development team. They reported directly to me." "Did you know, Victor?" Another longer pause. "I knew we were aggressive with the timeline. I didn't look too closely at the methods." The careful phrasing told Maxwell everything. Victor had known, maybe not the specifics, but enough. He had chosen not to question, not to probe, because doing so might have delayed the project and reduced their margins. Just as Maxwell himself would have done before a little girl's desperate cry in the rain had changed everything. "I want a complete audit," Maxwell said, his voice hardening. "Every project, every acquisition for the past 3 years. And I want a compensation package prepared for all affected Fairfield residents. Fair market value, not the minimum legal requirement." "Max, be reasonable. The shareholders will understand protecting the company from potential litigation, Maxwell cut in sharply. Get it done, Victor. I'll see you at the board meeting tomorrow. Ending the call, Maxwell stood in the hallway, listening to the simple melody still floating from the conservatory. Each note seemed to chip away at the wall he had built around himself after Nathan's passing, a wall constructed of spreadsheets and profit margins, of high rises and corporate acquisitions. The doorbell rang, interrupting his thoughts. Mrs. Sullivan appeared a moment later, her expression concerned. Mr. Thornton, there's a woman from Brighton Elementary School asking to see you. A Ms. Walker. She says it's about Emma. Maxwell frowned. Show her in. Catherine Walker was not what Maxwell had expected. In her early 40s, she carried herself with quiet confidence, her practical clothing and minimal makeup suggesting someone who valued substance over appearance. Her eyes, warm but watchful, assessed Maxwell with undisguised curiosity. Mr. Thornton, she began, accepting his offer to sit in the living room. I'm the guidance counselor at Brighton Elementary. We've been concerned about Emma Miller's unexplained absence. You know Emma? Maxwell asked, surprised. Of course, she was one of our students until about 2 months ago, when she suddenly stopped attending. The school made several attempts to contact her mother, but the phone had been disconnected. Ms. Walker leaned forward. May I ask how Emma came to be in your care? The question carried an undercurrent of suspicion that Maxwell couldn't fault. A wealthy businessman with a child who wasn't his would raise anyone's concerns. Briefly, Maxwell explained the circumstances of finding Emma and Oliver, omitting the connection to his company's development project. Ms. Walker's expression softened slightly. That explains why we couldn't reach Catherine. She was a devoted mother. She would never willingly abandon her children. The past tense wasn't lost on Maxwell. You don't believe she's coming back? Ms. Walker sighed. I hope I'm wrong, but a single mother desperate for help with no resources in this city. She didn't finish the thought. Emma mentioned she was in the school choir, Maxwell said, changing the subject. A smile touched Ms. Walker's lips. She has a beautiful voice and a natural talent for music that her circumstances haven't allowed her to develop. Would it be possible to re-enroll her? She seems stable here for now, and I think routine would be good for her. Ms. Walker studied him with renewed interest. That's a generous offer, Mr. Thornton, but there are legal considerations. You have no formal guardianship. I'm working on that, Maxwell replied, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. In the meantime, is there anything that can be done? I'd cover any costs, of course. I'd need to speak with Emma, Ms. Walker said after a moment's consideration, and we'd need temporary guardianship paperwork at minimum, but yes, it might be possible. As if summoned by their conversation, Emma appeared in the doorway, her expression brightening instantly. Ms. Walker. The warmth of their greeting confirmed what Maxwell had suspected. This woman had been more than just a school employee to Emma. The easy affection between them spoke of trust built over time. Emma has been telling me about the piano, Ms. Walker said when Maxwell rejoined them after giving them a moment alone. It seems she's found something wonderful here. Her tone was neutral, but Maxwell detected the question beneath the statement. What exactly was happening in this mansion? What were his intentions toward this child and her brother? Mr. Thornton saved Oliver, Emma said simply, answering the unasked question in her own way, and he makes really good hot chocolate. The comment, so childlike in its priorities, broke the tension. Ms. Walker laughed, and Maxwell found himself smiling genuinely. Ms. Walker was your teacher, he asked Emma. Sort of. She helped me when... Emma trailed off, her expression clouding. When things were difficult at home, Ms. Walker finished gently, Emma and I spent quite a bit of time together last year. The unspoken communication between them suggested a history Maxwell wasn't privy to, challenges Emma had faced that went beyond financial hardship. I've suggested that Emma might return. To Brighton Elementary, Maxwell said. Would you like that, Emma? The girl's eyes widened. Really, but what about Oliver? Ms. Chen could care for him during school hours, Maxwell assured her, "and I'd make sure you get there and back safely." The hope that bloomed on Emma's face made something twist in Maxwell's chest. Such a simple thing, the promise of school, of normalcy, yet it meant the world to her. "There are details to work out," Ms. Walker cautioned, though her expression had softened considerably. "But I think we could make it happen." As they walked Ms. Walker to the door, she paused, turning to Maxwell with a searching look. "Mr. Thornton, may I ask why you're doing this? You could have called child services that first night." The question, direct and unavoidable, forced Maxwell to confront something he had been avoiding. Why had he brought these children into his home? Why was he rearranging his life, questioning his business practices, challenging his oldest friend and business partner? "I'm not entirely sure," he admitted, the honesty surprising him. "But I know it's the right thing to do." Ms. Walker's expression was unreadable. "These children have been through enough trauma. Whatever your reasons, please be certain about this path before you go further. They deserve that much." As she left, Maxwell stood in the doorway, watching her car disappear down the driveway. In his office, unanswered calls accumulated. In the boardroom across town, questions mounted. Tomorrow would bring confrontations he couldn't avoid. But today, in this unexpected moment of clarity, Maxwell Thornton understood that the path forward, however uncertain, was the only one he could take. Chapter 4. Stormy Horizons, the Thornton. Development boardroom fell silent as Maxwell concluded his presentation. The stunned expressions of the 12 board members reflected the radical nature of his proposal, halting the Fairfield Heights demolition, creating a substantial compensation fund for displaced residents, and implementing a complete overhaul of the company's community impact assessment procedures. "Let me get this straight," said Eleanor Whitman, the board's longest-serving member. "You want to delay our most profitable project by at least 6 months and allocate $20 million to compensate people we've already legally evicted." "People who were evicted with less than the legally required notice," Maxwell corrected, his voice steady. "People who received inadequate relocation assistance. People whose lives were upended by our pursuit of profit without consideration of human cost." Victor shifted uncomfortably beside him. Throughout the presentation, he had remained conspicuously silent, neither supporting Maxwell's proposal nor openly opposing it. "This is unprecedented," said Robert Chen, the chief financial officer. "The shareholders will understand protecting the company from potential litigation," Maxwell finished, echoing his words to Victor from the day before. "Our actions at Fairfield Heights were technically legal, but ethically questionable. If this became public..." "So this is about avoiding scandal?" Eleanor interrupted, eyes narrowing. Maxwell met her gaze directly. "This is about doing the right thing, something we should have considered from the beginning." The discussion that followed was heated. Several board members expressed outright opposition to the plan, citing fiduciary responsibility to shareholders. Others seemed cautiously supportive, particularly after Maxwell presented the findings of his preliminary audit, findings that suggested the Fairfield Heights case might not be isolated. "I need a decision today," Maxwell concluded. "The longer we delay, the more difficult remediation becomes." Eleanor leaned forward. "Maxwell, we've worked together for 15 years. In all that time, I've never seen you advocate for anything but the bottom line. What's changed?" The question hung in the air. Maxwell could feel Victor watching him intently, along with every other person in the room. What had changed? Everything. And it had started with a child's cry in the rain. "I've been reminded that behind every spreadsheet are real people," Maxwell said finally. "People whose lives are affected by the decisions we make in this room. I'm not suggesting we abandon profitability, merely that we balance it with responsibility." After a tense silence, Eleanor spoke again. "I move we approve Maxwell's proposal, with quarterly review of its implementation and impact." The motion passed narrowly, 7 votes to 5. As the board members filed out, Maxwell felt a curious mixture of relief and apprehension. He had won this battle, but at what cost? Victor remained behind, his expression unreadable. "Bold move," he said once they were alone. very bold. "It was necessary," Maxwell replied, gathering his papers. "The question is, necessary for what? The company or something else?" Victor's tone was carefully neutral, but the implication was clear. Maxwell faced his longtime associate. "Both, I hope." "The board may have approved your plan, but they're watching you, Max. We all are. This sudden conversion to corporate saint, it's raising questions." "Questions I'm happy to answer," Maxwell said evenly. "The audit continues. Victor, all the way back to the Harrison Street project 3 years ago." Victor's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course. Transparency is our new watchword, isn't it?" The tension between them was palpable as they left the boardroom. For 15 years, they had been aligned in vision and purpose. Now, for the first time, Maxwell sensed a fundamental divergence, one that threatened not just their professional relationship, but the company itself. His phone buzzed as he reached his car, a text from Mrs. Sullivan that sent a chill through him. "Come home quickly. Emma very ill. Dr. Bennett here." The drive back to Beacon Hill was a blur. Maxwell found himself praying to a god he hadn't addressed in years, bargaining in the way that only the truly desperate can. Not again. Please, not again. Dr. Bennett met him at the door, his expression grave. "High fever, severe abdominal pain, likely appendicitis. We need to get her to Massachusetts General immediately." Maxwell followed him upstairs to find Emma curled on her bed, face contorted in pain. Miss Chen stood nearby holding a crying Oliver. "Emma," Maxwell said softly, kneeling beside the bed. "Dr. Bennett thinks we need to take you to the hospital." The girl's eyes, glassy with fever, found his face. "I don't want to go," she whispered. "Who will take care of Oliver?" "Ms. Chen will stay with him," Maxwell assured her, his heart twisting at her concern for her brother, even in her own distress. "And I'll be with you the whole time." Emma's small hand reached for his. "Promise?" "I promise." The emergency room at Massachusetts General was crowded, but Dr. Bennett's privileges secured immediate attention. As Emma was whisked away for imaging, Maxwell found himself in the strange limbo of hospital waiting, that suspended animation where time simultaneously crawls and races. "Family of Emma Miller?" A nurse called after what seemed like hours. Maxwell rose immediately. "Yes." The nurse gave him an appraising look. "Are you her father?" The question stopped him short. "I'm her guardian," he said, after a brief hesitation. The nurse nodded. "The doctor would like to speak with you." Dr. Patel was young and efficient, her manner direct but not unkind. "It's definitely appendicitis and we need to operate immediately. The good news is we caught it before rupture, so the procedure should be straightforward. I'll need consent forms signed." She handed Maxwell a clipboard with several pages of dense text. At the top, in bold letters, "Parental guardian consent for surgical procedure. Mr. Thornton, Maxwell Thornton. Mr. Thornton, are you Emma's legal guardian?" The question again, this time with more weight, more consequence. "I'm in." "The process of establishing guardianship," Maxwell replied, the half-truth sitting uncomfortably on his tongue. "Her mother is unavailable." Dr. Patel's expression remained neutral. "I see. In emergency situations like this, we can proceed with the consent of a de facto guardian. But you should know that child services will need to be notified." Maxwell nodded, signing the forms with a steady hand despite the turmoil within. The immediate priority was Emma's health. He would deal with the legal complications afterward. "Can I see her before the surgery?" Dr. Patel led him to a curtained area where Emma lay on a gurney, an IV in her arm and fear evident in her eyes. "Hey there," Maxwell said, attempting a reassuring smile as he took her hand. "The doctors are going to take good care of you." "Will you wait for me?" Emma asked, her voice small. "I'll be right here," Maxwell promised, "and when you wake up, I'll still be here." As they wheeled her toward the operating room, Maxwell felt a weight descend on his shoulders, the full responsibility of the promise he had just made. Not just to wait during surgery, but to be there for her, to protect her, to provide the stability she so desperately needed. In the waiting room, Maxwell found himself doing something he hadn't done in years: praying. Not the bargaining prayers of the desperate drive to the hospital, but genuine entreaties for a child's well-being. "Mr. Thornton?" He looked up to find Catherine Walker standing before him, concern etched on her face. "Ms. Walker, how did you—" "Mrs. Sullivan called the school when Emma got sick," she explained, sitting beside him. "I came as soon as I heard. How is she?" "In surgery. Appendicitis." Catherine nodded, her presence oddly comforting in the sterile hospital environment. "She's in good hands. Mass General has an excellent pediatric surgical team." They sat in silence for a moment, the unspoken question hanging between them. "You're wondering why I didn't call child services," Maxwell said finally. "The thought crossed my mind," Catherine admitted. "Though I'm beginning to understand why you might have hesitated." Maxwell looked at her, surprised by the lack of judgment in her tone. "I've been working with children for 15 years, Mr. Thornton. I've seen the system at its best and at its worst. Sometimes the official channels aren't what a child needs." "And what does Emma need?" Maxwell asked, genuinely wanting her opinion. Catherine considered the question carefully. "Stability, safety, someone who sees her, really sees her, for the remarkable child she is." She paused. "From what I've observed, you're providing those things." Her words provided unexpected reassurance. "The doctor mentioned child services will be notified now." "That was inevitable," Catherine said gently, "but it doesn't have to be the end of your involvement. There are options: temporary guardianship, foster certification, even adoption if that's something you're considering." Adoption. The word hung in the air between them, weighty with implication. "I hardly know them," Maxwell said, voicing the doubt that had been nagging at him. "Don't you?" Catherine's question was simple, but penetrating. "You've opened your home and your heart to these children. That suggests you know something essential about them, and about yourself." Before Maxwell could respond, his phone buzzed. Victor again. With a sigh, he answered. "Max, where are you? The investors from Shanghai are waiting. This meeting has been on the calendar for months." Maxwell had completely forgotten. "I can't make it, Victor. Family emergency." The silence that followed was telling. "Family emergency," Victor repeated, the words carefully neutral. "I see. Should I reschedule or handle it myself?" "Handle it," Maxwell said without hesitation. "You know the proposal as well as I do." "Of course. I hope everything is resolved satisfactorily." The call ended with the distinct impression that Victor had drawn his own conclusions. Conclusions that would likely fuel the growing concerns at Thornton Development. "Work?" Catherine asked as he put the phone away. "Yes. It seems less important now." She smiled slightly. A perspective shift happens when children enter your life. Priorities rearrange themselves, often, permanently. The hours crept by. Catherine stayed, her calm presence a counterpoint to Maxwell's growing anxiety. They spoke of Emma, her academic promise, her musical talent, the challenges she had faced in her young life. Her mother did the best she could, Catherine said. Catherine was working 2 jobs, taking night classes. She wanted more for her children than she had. "What about the father?" Catherine shook her head. Emma's father was never in the picture. Oliver's father was around briefly but disappeared. When Catherine became pregnant, the abandonment these children had experienced made Maxwell's heart ache. His own son had never lacked for material things, but emotional presence, that had been another matter. Always another meeting, another deal, another reason to be absent. "I had a son," Maxwell found himself saying, the words emerging unprompted. "Nathan, he loved music too." Catherine's expression softened with understanding. "Had?" "Car accident, 15 years ago." Maxwell swallowed hard. "I was supposed to pick him up from a recital, but a meeting ran long. My wife went instead. The other driver ran a red light." The memory still had the power to hollow him out. The phone call, the hospital, the terrible stillness of the room where they lay. His wife had lingered for 3 days before following their son into whatever lay beyond. Maxwell had thrown himself into work afterward, building Thornton Development into a corporate giant. as if success could fill the void their absence had. Left? "I'm so sorry," Catherine said simply. "I wasn't there when they needed me," Maxwell continued, the confession pouring out now. "Always another meeting, another deal. I thought I was building something for them, but in the end, you lost everything that mattered," Catherine finished gently. Maxwell nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. "Mr. Thornton, Maxwell," Catherine said after a moment, "we can't change the past, but sometimes life gives us second chances, often in the most unexpected ways." Their conversation was interrupted by Dr. Patel's return. "Mr. Thornton, Emma's out of surgery. Everything went smoothly. She's in recovery now." The relief that flooded through. Maxwell was physical, a wave that seemed to wash away years of accumulated tension. "Can I see her?" "In about 30 minutes. She's still coming out of anesthesia." As promised, Maxwell was at Emma's bedside when she opened her eyes. Groggy from medication, she blinked slowly, her gaze focusing on his face. "You stayed," she murmured. "I promised I would," Maxwell replied, taking her small hand in his. "Is Oliver okay?" "He's fine. Mrs. Sullivan and Ms. Chen are taking good care of him." Emma's eyes drifted closed again. "Good," she whispered. "Don't want us to be separated." The simple statement cut straight to Maxwell's heart. As Emma slipped back into sleep, he made a silent vow. These children would not be separated. Whatever it took, whatever he had to change, in his life, in himself, he would find a way to keep them together. A soft knock at the door revealed a hospital social worker, her expression professionally neutral. "Mr. Thornton? I'm Angela Reyes, from Child Protective Services. I'd like to speak with you about Emma and her brother." Maxwell rose, casting a final glance at Emma's sleeping form before following Ms. Reyes to a small consultation room. Catherine joined them, introducing herself as Emma's school counselor. "I understand you've been caring for Emma and her infant brother," Ms. Reyes began, consulting her notes. "Can you explain how that came about?" Maxwell recounted the events of that rainy night, this time including the connection to his company's development project. Catherine's presence gave him the courage to be completely forthcoming, acknowledging both his company's role in the family's displacement and his growing attachment to the children. Ms. Reyes listened without comment, taking detailed notes. "And the children's mother. We haven't been able to locate her," Maxwell admitted. "The circumstances suggest she may not return." "I see." Ms. Reyes's expression remained professionally detached. "Mr. Thornton, while your intentions appear honorable, the fact remains that you have no legal standing with these children. In cases like this, our protocol is to place them in emergency foster care while we conduct a more thorough investigation." "Separate." "Them?" Maxwell asked, alarm rising in his chest. "Unfortunately, finding placements for siblings, especially with an infant involved, can be challenging." "That's unacceptable," Maxwell said firmly. "Emma's primary concern has been staying with her brother. I can provide them both with a stable, safe environment." "I understand your concern, but is there no alternative?" Catherine interjected. "Mr. Thornton has demonstrated genuine care for these children. Uprooting them now, especially with Emma recovering from surgery, seems unnecessarily traumatic." Ms. Reyes hesitated. "There is the possibility of emergency temporary guardianship, but it requires court approval, home studies, background checks." "Whatever it takes," Maxwell interrupted. "I'm prepared to do whatever is necessary to keep them together and safe." The determination in his voice must have registered with Ms. Reyes. After a moment's consideration, she nodded. "I'll need to conduct an initial home assessment, and you'll need to appear before a family court judge within 5 business days." "I understand." "Mr. Thornton," Ms. Reyes added, her professional demeanor softening slightly, "I should warn you that this is just the beginning of a complex process. Temporary guardianship is not permanent. If the mother returns or if other family members come forward, the implication was clear. Whatever arrangement he established could be temporary. The thought of losing the children now, after all they had been through together, was unbearable. One step at a time, Catherine said gently, seeming to sense his distress. For now, let's focus on getting Emma well and ensuring both children have stability. As they left the consultation room, Maxwell found himself facing a future filled with uncertainty, court appearances, home studies, evaluations of his fitness, to care for children whose lives had become unexpectedly entwined with his own. Yet beneath the uncertainty lay a surprising clarity. For the first time in 15 years, Maxwell Thornton knew exactly what mattered most, and he would fight with everything he had to protect it. Chapter 5. Breaking Points. 2 weeks after Emma's surgery, Maxwell's life had been transformed into a careful balancing act. Mornings began with Oliver's cheerful babbling through the baby monitor, followed by breakfast with Emma, who was recovering quickly, her natural resilience shining through. School drop-offs, conference calls, meetings with lawyers regarding guardianship, and evenings spent helping with homework or simply being present. The rhythm was exhausting, yet strangely fulfilling. Today, however, threatened to upset that fragile balance. Maxwell sat in his study, reviewing the comprehensive audit report that had just been delivered. The findings were worse than he had anticipated: systematic corner-cutting, ethical lapses, and in some cases, outright deception in multiple development projects over the past 3 years. Most damning was the paper trail that led directly to Victor Reed. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Mrs. Sullivan entered, her expression concerned. "Mr. Thornton, Mr. Lawrence is here to see you. He says it's urgent." Philip Lawrence was Thornton Development's chief legal counsel, a shrewd, cautious man who had guided the company through numerous complex negotiations. His unscheduled appearance suggested trouble. "Send him in," Maxwell said, closing the audit report. Philip entered with the brisk efficiency that characterized everything he did. "Max, we have a situation." "That sounds ominous." "It is." Philip placed his briefcase on the desk and extracted a file. "The board received this morning. Victor compiled it." Maxwell opened the file to find detailed financial records, photographs and internal communications, all presented to suggest that he had been misappropriating company resources for personal use. "He's documenting your domestic situation," Philip explained awkwardly. "The medical care for the children, the use of company personnel for childcare, the redirection of corporate focus away from shareholder interests." Maxwell scanned the materials, anger building, as he realized the extent of Victor's betrayal. "This is his play? To paint me as unfit to lead because I'm helping 2 children?" "It's more calculated than that," Philip replied, his legal mind dissecting the strategy. "He's framing it as a breach of fiduciary duty, suggesting that your judgment has been compromised by personal entanglements, that you're making business decisions based on emotion rather than sound financial principles. And the board is taking this seriously." Philip's hesitation was answer enough. "There's more. The business press has gotten wind of internal discord. The Journal is preparing a piece on turmoil at Thornton Development. Stock is already down 4 points on the rumors." Maxwell rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of corporate politics pressing down on him, just as his personal life was finally finding meaning. What's Victor's endgame here? "A vote of no confidence at next week's board meeting," Philip Shust said bluntly. "He's been working the members individually. Eleanor is still with you, but several others are wavering." The betrayal stung, but it wasn't entirely unexpected. Victor had always been ambitious, always calculating. In the old days, Maxwell had valued those qualities. They complemented his own ruthless approach to business. Now, they were being turned against him. "And your advice, counselor?" Philip chose his words carefully. "Professionally speaking, you need to reaffirm your commitment to the company. Distance yourself from distractions. Show the board that Thornton Development remains your priority." "And personally speaking?" A rare smile crossed Philip's face. "Personally, I think Victor's an opportunistic shark who's been hiding ethical lapses for years, and I think these kids might be the best thing that's happened to you in a long time." Maxwell's appreciation for his lawyer deepened. "Thank you for the warning, Phil. One more thing, Philip added, rising to leave. The temporary guardianship hearing is set for Thursday at 2 p.m. Family Court, Judge Martinez presiding. I took the liberty of arranging for Caroline Fisher to represent you. She's the best family law attorney in Massachusetts. Maxwell nodded gratefully. Send me her information, and Phil, keep me posted on Victor's movements. After Philip left, Maxwell sat motionless, contemplating the choices before him. The corporate battle looming would require his full attention, strategy, countermoves, board politics. Yet upstairs Emma was working on a school project, and Oliver was napping in what had become his nursery. The gulf between his two worlds seemed unbridgeable. His phone rang, a number he hadn't seen in years. His father. Maxwell, the familiar voice now roughened by age, came through the speaker. We need to talk. Harold Thornton had founded Thornton Construction 50 years ago, building it from a small contractor into a regional powerhouse before handing control to his son. Now 78, he had ostensibly retired to Florida, though Maxwell knew he still kept tabs on the company that bore his name. Dad, this is unexpected. Is it? I hear my company is in turmoil, that my son is being challenged by his own COO, that he's adopting street urchins and turning the business into a charity. The characterization made Maxwell's jaw tighten. Your information is incomplete and outdated. Then update me. In person. I'm at the Four Seasons. Maxwell checked his watch. Emma wouldn't be home from school for 2 hours, and Mrs. Sullivan was with Oliver. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Harold Thornton had always been an imposing figure, tall, broad-shouldered, with the weathered hands of a man who had started his career on construction sites. Age had diminished his physical presence somewhat, but the piercing blue eyes that Maxwell had inherited remained sharp and assessing. You look tired, Harold observed as Maxwell entered the hotel suite. It's been a demanding few weeks. Harold gestured to the sitting area, where a bottle of scotch and 2 glasses waited. I thought we might need this. Maxwell accepted the drink, but didn't immediately sit. Why are you really here, Dad? Victor called me, Harold admitted. No pretense of small talk. He's concerned about the direction of the company, about your focus. Victor is protecting himself, Maxwell countered. The audit revealed serious ethical lapses under his supervision. Harold's expression didn't change. Business is rarely black and white, Maxwell. You know that better than most. Some things are, Maxwell replied, thinking of Emma's face when she spoke of losing her home. Right and wrong still exist, even in business. A cynical smile crossed Harold's face. This moral awakening, it coincides remarkably with your newfound interest in playing house. The dismissive characterization hit a nerve. Those children have names. Emma and Oliver. Their mother disappeared after being evicted from a building our company demolished. A building that, according to our own audit, was cleared using questionable tactics that Victor authorized. Harold sipped his scotch, unmoved. Collateral damage happens in development. We've never apologized for progress. Progress, Maxwell's voice rose slightly. Is that what we're calling it now, throwing families onto the street, cutting corners on safety, bribing inspectors? Watch yourself, Harold warned, the old authority creeping into his voice. I built that company from nothing, everything you have. I know what you built, Maxwell interrupted. I've spent 15 years expanding it. But at what cost, Dad? What have we really been building? The question hung between them, unanswered. Harold studied his son with new interest, as if seeing him clearly for the first time in years. Tell me about these children, he said finally, his tone losing some of its edge. Surprised by the shift, Maxwell found himself describing Emma and Oliver, their resilience, their bond, the way they had somehow awakened something long dormant within him. The girl Emma, she plays piano, Harold asked, seeming to fixate on this detail. By ear, mostly. She has a natural talent. Something flickered across Harold's face. A memory, perhaps. Your mother played before she got sick. The mention of Maxwell's mother, who had passed when he was 12, was unexpected. Harold rarely spoke of her. I remember, Maxwell said softly. A heavy silence fell between them, weighted with unspoken history. Finally, Harold set down his glass. I'm not well, Maxwell. The abrupt statement caught Maxwell off guard. What do you mean? Cancer, pancreatic, terminal. Harold delivered the news with the same directness he had always used for business matters. 6 months, maybe less. Maxwell felt the room tilt slightly. For all their complicated history, for all the unresolved tensions between them, Harold was his father, the only family he had left. I'm sorry, he said, inadequate words for the magnitude of the revelation. Have you started treatment? Harold shook his head. What's the point? Trading a few extra months for misery? No, I'd rather spend what time I have left with clarity. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Would it have mattered? The question held no accusation, only genuine curiosity. We haven't had a real conversation in years, Maxwell. Business discussions, yes. Family, not since Nathan and Claire, Maxwell finished. His son and wife, Harold's grandson and daughter-in-law, whose passing had created a chasm between the two men that had never been bridged. Harold nodded slowly. I handled that badly. I thought pushing you back into work would help. I was wrong. The admission, unprecedented from a man who prided himself on being right, left Maxwell momentarily speechless. Why are you telling me this now? Because Victor Reed is making a play for my company, Harold replied, the possessive pronoun telling, and I need to know if my son still wants it. The directness of the question required equal honesty. I don't know, Maxwell admitted. 2 months ago I would have said yes without hesitation. Now there are complications, children, emotions. Harold didn't phrase it as criticism, merely observation. Not complications, Maxwell corrected. Clarity. Harold considered this, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Bring them to dinner tomorrow, he said abruptly. The children. I should meet them before I make any decisions. Decisions about what? About whether to intervene with the board, Harold replied matter-of-factly. I may be retired, but I still own 20% of voting shares, and I've known Eleanor Whitman since she was an associate fresh out of business school. Maxwell understood the implied offer. His father could help secure his position against Victor's challenge. But at what price? This isn't a business transaction, Dad. Emma and Oliver aren't negotiating chips. Of course not, Harold agreed, surprising him again. They're children who need stability. The question is whether you can provide that while running a multi-billion-dollar company that's currently in turmoil. I need to assess the situation for myself. Maxwell recognized the business logic being applied to a personal situation, classic Harold Thornton. Yet beneath the pragmatism, he sensed something else, perhaps genuine interest or even concern. Dinner tomorrow, Maxwell agreed, but keep in mind, Emma is still recovering from surgery, and they've both been through enough without being subjected to interrogation. Noted, Harold said with the ghost of a smile. I'll be on my best behavior. As Maxwell left the hotel, his mind raced with the implications of his father's revelation, terminal illness, board intervention, the complex intersection of business, and family that had always defined the Thornton legacy. His phone buzzed with a text from Catherine Walker. Emma mentioned you're playing the piano with her now. Progress on many fronts? The simple message brought an unexpected smile to his face. Over the past 2 weeks, Catherine had become a regular presence in their lives, visiting Emma during her recovery, helping with the transition back to school, offering insights that helped Maxwell navigate the unfamiliar territory of raising children. Small steps, he replied. She's teaching me as much as I'm teaching her. Catherine's response came quickly. That's usually how it works with children. How are the guardianship preparations coming? Hearing scheduled for Thursday. My lawyer seems confident. Good. Emma mentioned it today. She's trying to appear unconcerned, but it's weighing on her. Maxwell could imagine Emma's forced nonchalance, the brave face she put on when addressing adult concerns. It had taken time to recognize the pattern, to see past the self-sufficiency to the vulnerable child beneath. Would you join us for dinner tonight? He texted impulsively. Emma would love to see you. The pause before Catherine's response felt significant. Just Emma? The question carried layers of meaning that Maxwell wasn't quite ready to unpack. His relationship with Catherine had evolved beyond Emma's school counselor and temporary guardian. There was a connection forming, tentative but undeniable. "I'd appreciate your company as well," he admitted. "It's been a complicated day." Dinner. Sounds lovely. 7. Perfect. Returning home, Maxwell found the atmosphere transformed from the morning's tension. Emma was in the conservatory, plinking out a simple melody while Oliver sat nearby in his bouncer, entranced by the sound. "That's new," Maxwell observed, recognizing the tune as something beyond her usual practice pieces. Emma looked up with a shy smile. "I'm composing. Ms. Walker says everyone can create music if they listen to what's inside them." "It's beautiful," Maxwell said, meaning it. "What's it called?" Emma considered the question seriously. "I'm not sure yet. Maybe Oliver's song because he seems to like it." As if in confirmation, Oliver gurgled happily, tiny hands waving in rhythm to the notes. "I invited Ms. Walker for dinner," Maxwell mentioned casually. "I hope that's okay." Emma's face brightened. "Really? Can I show her my composition?" "I'm sure she'd love that." The evening unfolded with unexpected warmth. Catherine arrived with a children's book for Emma and a soft toy for Oliver, thoughtful gestures that spoke of genuine care for the children. Dinner was relaxed, conversation flowing easily as Emma regaled them with stories from her return to school. "Brady says my scar is cool," she reported, referring to the small incision from her appendectomy with pride. "He wants to see it, but I told him that's inappropriate." Catherine laughed. "Very good boundary setting, Emma." After dinner, Emma insisted on performing her composition, sitting at the piano with newfound confidence. The simple melody had a haunting quality, wistful yet hopeful like its young composer. Catherine's eyes met Maxwell's over Emma's head, sharing a moment of appreciation for the child's resilience and talent. Something passed between them. Understanding, connection, possibility. Later, after Emma had gone to bed and Oliver was settled for the night, Maxwell and Catherine sat in the library, wine glasses in hand. "You seem troubled," Catherine observed, beyond the usual chaos of unexpected parenthood. Maxwell considered how much to share. With anyone else he would have deflected, compartmentalized. With Catherine, he found himself wanting honesty. "My father is in town," he began. "He's dying, pancreatic, cancer, and my COO is making a play for control of the company, using my relationship with Emma and Oliver as ammunition." Catherine absorbed this with the calm thoughtfulness he had come to appreciate. "That's quite a lot to carry alone." "I'm not alone anymore," Maxwell replied, the realization striking him as he spoke the words. "That's the irony. 2 months ago, I had nothing but the company. Now you have everything that really matters," Catherine finished. "And it's all at risk." Maxwell nodded, grateful for her understanding. "Victor, my COO, has been systematically undermining me with the board. He's portraying my concern for the children as emotional instability, my ethical reforms as financial irresponsibility." "And the board is receptive to this?" "Some members. There's a vote of no confidence scheduled for next week." Catherine considered this. "What would losing the company mean to you?" The question was simple yet profound. A month ago the answer would have been obvious. Losing Thornton Development would have meant losing everything. Now, "Financially I'd be fine," Maxwell said slowly. "I have personal assets separate from the company, but it's been my life's work, or at least the past 15 years of it." "Since you lost Nathan and Claire," Catherine said gently. Maxwell nodded. "The company became my refuge, my purpose." "And now?" "Now I have a different purpose," he admitted. "Or additional ones at least." Catherine's expression softened. "Children have a way of rearranging our priorities. Sometimes painfully, but always necessarily. My father wants to meet them," Maxwell said, changing the subject slightly. "Dinner tomorrow night." "Ah," Catherine said with understanding. "Hence the extra weight on your shoulders." "He's complicated. Old-school business values. Success. At all costs, he built the company from nothing, expanded aggressively, never let ethics interfere with opportunity. "And you followed in his footsteps," Catherine observed without judgment. "Until recently, yes," Maxwell acknowledged. "Now, I'm trying to change course, and he's returned to witness it, along with the consequences." Catherine sipped her wine thoughtfully. Family dynamics have a way of reverting to established patterns, especially in times of stress. Be mindful of that tomorrow. The insight was sharp and perceptive. "You sound like you speak from experience." A shadow crossed Catherine's face. "Let's just say I understand complicated family relationships. My father was demanding. Nothing was ever quite good enough." The parallel to his own relationship with Harold wasn't lost on Maxwell. "How did you break the cycle?" "By recognizing it," Catherine replied simply. "Awareness is the first step toward change. The patterns lose power when you can see them clearly." Their conversation continued late into the evening, moving from family dynamics to Catherine's work with children to shared tastes in literature and music. The connection between them deepened with each exchange, a meeting of minds that promised something more. When Catherine finally rose to leave, Maxwell walked her to the door. "Thank you," he said, the words encompassing more than just the evening. "For everything. You're doing well with them, you know," Catherine said, her hand briefly touching his arm. "Emma and Oliver are fortunate to have found you." "I think it's the other way around," Maxwell replied honestly. Their eyes held for a moment, the potential between them clear yet unrushed. Catherine smiled, a promise of future conversations, future evenings, future possibilities. "Good luck." "Tomorrow," she said, "with your father. Remember, awareness breaks the cycle." As Maxwell watched her drive away, he felt both lighter and more determined. Tomorrow would bring challenges, his father's assessment, the continuing corporate battle, the looming guardianship hearing. But for the first time in years, he wasn't facing these challenges alone or without purpose. Upstairs, Emma and Oliver slept peacefully, unaware of the forces gathering around their small family unit. Maxwell checked on them one last time before retiring to his own room, the habit now as natural as breathing. In the quiet of the sleeping house, he made a silent vow. Whatever came next, whatever sacrifices were required, he would protect what mattered most, even if it meant letting go of everything he had once believed defined him. Chapter 6. Full Circle. Snow fell gently outside the courthouse windows, dusting Boston in a pristine white blanket that seemed to muffle the city's usual clamor. Maxwell straightened his tie for the third time, his normally steady hands betraying his nervousness. "The paperwork is impeccable," Caroline Fisher, his family law attorney, assured him. "Home study completed, background checks clear, character references from Dr. Bennett, Ms. Walker, even Judge Martinez's former law partner. We've done everything possible." Maxwell nodded, his eyes fixed on Emma and Oliver in the corridor outside. Emma wore her special occasion dress, navy blue with a white collar, and was keeping Oliver entertained with a small picture book. The sight of them, so vulnerable yet so resilient, tightened Maxwell's chest with an emotion he was still learning to name. "And if Catherine Miller returns?" he asked, voicing the concern that had lingered at the edges of his mind. Caroline's expression softened. "The investigation has been thorough, Maxwell. There's been no trace of her for over 2 months. No hospital admissions, no arrests, no use of her social security number. The court has made a finding of abandonment, which clears the path for adoption. Just want to be prepared for every possibility." "That's what makes you a good parent," Caroline replied with a smile. "Now, let's go make it official." The adoption hearing was surprisingly brief, a stark contrast to the months of preparation, home studies, and legal filings that had preceded it. Judge Martinez, a dignified woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, reviewed the file carefully before addressing Maxwell directly. "Mr. Thornton, raising children is the most important work any of us can do. It requires patience, selflessness, and a commitment that extends far beyond this courtroom. Are you prepared for that responsibility?" Maxwell met her gaze steadily. I am, Your Honor. And you understand that this commitment is permanent? That these children will be in every legal and moral sense your own? That's exactly what I want, Your Honor. Judge Martinez nodded, seemingly satisfied. She turned her attention to Emma, who sat straight-backed and solemn beside Maxwell. Emma, you're old enough to have a say in this decision. Do you understand what adoption means? Emma nodded, her voice clear despite the formal setting. It means, Mr. Thornton, Maxwell will be our dad forever, and nobody can take us away from each other. That's right, and is that what you want? Emma's gaze shifted briefly to Maxwell, then back to the judge. Yes, he takes care of us. He plays piano with me and reads to Oliver, and he promised we'd always stay together. The simple testimony, delivered with a child's directness, moved everyone. In the courtroom, Judge Martinez smiled warmly. Well then, I see no reason to delay. By the power vested in me by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, I hereby decree that Emma Catherine Miller and Oliver James Miller shall henceforth be known as Emma Catherine Thornton and Oliver James Thornton, with all the rights and privileges thereof. Congratulations to the Thornton family. The bang of the gavel echoed in Maxwell's ears as Emma threw her arms around him. We're really staying? Forever? Forever, Maxwell confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. We're a family now. Outside, the courthouse, Catherine waited with a small wrapped package. She embraced Emma warmly before handing the gift to Maxwell. A family portrait, she explained as he unwrapped a simple silver frame. Mrs. Sullivan took it last Sunday in the conservatory. I thought today would be the perfect occasion. The photograph captured a moment of unguarded joy. Maxwell at the piano with Emma beside him, Oliver on his lap reaching for the keys. The image of the family they had become brought tears to his eyes. It's perfect, he said, meeting Catherine's gaze with unspoken gratitude. Now, I believe someone mentioned Celebration ice cream? Catherine said to Emma, whose face lit up. Dad, promised, Emma replied, the new title slipping naturally from her lips for the first time, even though it's snowing. Ice cream is good in any weather, Maxwell said, his heart expanding at being called Dad. Shall we? As they walked toward the car, Maxwell's phone rang, Victor's number. For a moment he considered ignoring it. The board vote was scheduled for the following day, and he had deliberately disconnected from Thornton Development Affairs to focus on the adoption. Go ahead, Catherine encouraged, understanding in her eyes. We'll wait in the car. Maxwell answered with a simple Victor. The board meeting has been moved up. Victor's voice was tense, lacking its usual smooth confidence. It's happening now. Your father called it. My father? He showed up at headquarters an hour ago, called an emergency session. Maxwell, what's going on? Maxwell remembered his dinner with Harold and the children 2 nights before, an evening that had begun awkwardly but ended with unexpected warmth. Emma, initially shy, had gradually opened up, especially when Harold mentioned his late wife's piano playing. By dessert, she was demonstrating her composition, with Harold listening intently, something like respect in his weathered features. Later, after the children were asleep, Harold had studied Maxwell with new eyes. They've changed you, he observed. For the better, I think. They've reminded me of what matters, Maxwell had replied. Harold had nodded slowly. I've been thinking about legacy lately. Unsurprising, given my condition. I built Thornton Development to last, to mean something. But buildings fall, Maxwell. Companies get sold or broken up. Real legacy. It's what you pass on to the next generation. The conversation that followed had been the most honest they'd had in decades, about business ethics, about Maxwell's proposed reforms, about Victor's betrayal, about the kind of company Thornton Development could become. I'll handle it, Maxwell told Victor now. Tell the board I'll be there in 30 minutes. Catherine raised an eyebrow as he rejoined them in the car. Crisis at the office? My father has called an emergency board meeting. I need to be there. Emma's face fell. But our celebration... Maxwell knelt to her level. Just a small delay, I promise. Ice cream will taste even better after this is resolved. Would you and Oliver be okay waiting with Catherine for a little while? Emma nodded bravely, though disappointment shadowed her eyes. We'll be okay. That's my girl, Maxwell said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I won't be long. Catherine touched his arm as he turned to leave. Remember what matters most, she said softly. With those words echoing in his mind, Maxwell entered. Thornton Development Headquarters 30 minutes later. The familiar glass and steel edifice that had been the center of his existence for 15 years now felt strangely distant, important still, but no longer defining. Eleanor Whitman intercepted him in the lobby. Maxwell, thank God, it's chaos up there. What exactly is happening, Eleanor? Your father arrived with documentation, financial records, emails, evidence of Victor's systematic undermining of company protocols. He's been presenting for the past hour. Eleanor's expression was a mixture of shock and grudging admiration. Harold may be ill, but he's lost none of his fire. The boardroom fell silent as Maxwell entered. Harold stood at the head of the table, commanding the space despite his diminished physical condition. Victor sat rigidly on the opposite end, his usual polished appearance showing signs of strain. Ah, the man himself, Harold said, nodding to his son. Perfect timing. We've just finished reviewing the evidence of Mr. Reed's creative accounting. Victor's face flushed with anger. This is a witch hunt, a distraction from the real issue, which is Maxwell's increasingly erratic leadership. Erratic, Harold repeated with dangerous calm. Is that what we're calling integrity now? My son discovered ethical lapses that you deliberately concealed. Victor, lapses that put this company at risk of significant legal exposure. Maxwell took the seat Harold indicated, surveying the faces around the table. The board members appeared shaken, their earlier skepticism replaced by confusion and concern. What Victor hasn't told you, Harold continued, is that while he was busy undermining Maxwell's authority, he was also negotiating with Westridge capital to orchestrate a leveraged buyout, a move that would have loaded the company with debt and likely resulted in massive layoffs, all while making him personally very rich. Murmurs of shock rippled around the table. Victor leapt to his feet. That's a lie. I've always acted in the company's best interests. We have the emails, Victor, Harold said wearily, sliding a folder across the table. Your private server isn't as private as you thought. As the board members examined the evidence, Maxwell caught his father's eye. A silent communication passed between them, acknowledgement of a coordinated strategy that neither had explicitly discussed. Ladies and gentlemen, Maxwell addressed the board for the first time. I understand your concerns about my recent focus on ethical reforms and my personal situation. You've been told that these changes reflect instability or lack of commitment to the company's success. The truth is precisely the opposite. He outlined his vision for Thornton Development, a company that balanced profit with social responsibility, that viewed community impact as a crucial metric alongside financial returns, that could lead the industry in sustainable development while maintaining strong returns for shareholders. The path I'm proposing isn't easy, Maxwell acknowledged. It requires examining practices we've taken for granted. It means acknowledging past mistakes, but it also positions us for long-term stability in a market that increasingly values corporate responsibility. Eleanor spoke first after Maxwell finished. I move for an immediate vote of confidence in Maxwell's leadership and the removal of Victor Reed from all positions within Thornton Development. The motion passed unanimously. Victor, his composure finally breaking, glared at Maxwell. You think this is over? I built half the projects in this company's portfolio. I have relationships with investors that you can't touch. You also authorized illegal evictions, falsified compliance documents, and attempted to orchestrate a hostile takeover, Maxwell replied calmly. Your personal belongings will be packed and delivered to your home. Security will escort you from the building. As Victor was led away, the board moved on to other business, approving Maxwell's proposed reforms, establishing a committee to oversee implementation, discussing the press strategy to address the shift in corporate values. Harold remained silent through most of this, observing with an inscrutable expression. Only when the meeting concluded did he approach his son. Well played, he said simply. We make a good team, Maxwell acknowledged, when we're on the same side. A shadow of regret crossed Harold's face. We should have been on the same side more often. I've missed a lot being stubborn. The admission, so uncharacteristic from a man who had built his identity on being right, struck Maxwell deeply. He thought of the years lost to mutual silence, of the relationship they might have had. We still have time, he said, meaning it. Harold smiled faintly. Some, not as much as I'd like. Enough to get to know my new grandchildren, at least. They'd like that, Maxwell replied, surprised to find it was true. In fact, we're having a celebration today. Ice cream despite the snow, would you join us? Something that might have been gratitude flickered in Harold's eyes. I'd be honored. Catherine, Emma, and Oliver were waiting at Maxwell's favorite ice cream parlor in Beacon Hill, a small family-owned place that had been serving homemade desserts for 3 generations. Emma's face lit up when she saw Maxwell and Harold enter. Dad, did you fix the company problems? We did, Maxwell confirmed, still marveling at how naturally she called him Dad now. And look who's joining our celebration. Emma regarded Harold with cautious interest. Are you feeling better, Mr. Harold? You looked tired at dinner. Harold, unused to such direct concern, appeared momentarily flustered. I have good days and not so good days. Today is a good one. That's good, Emma said decisively. We're having ice cream because we're officially a family now. The judge said so. So I heard, Harold replied, taking the seat beside her. That's quite an accomplishment. As Maxwell sat beside Catherine, their hands found each other beneath the table, a small private acknowledgement of the connection that had been growing between them. Everything okay? She asked quietly. Better than okay, Maxwell replied. Victor's been removed. The board has approved the reforms, and my father— He glanced at Harold, who was listening intently as Emma explained her ice cream selection strategy. My father is here. Catherine squeezed his hand. One big, happy family? Getting there, Maxwell said, watching as Oliver grabbed Harold's finger with his tiny hand, drawing a surprised smile from the older man, step by step. The next few months passed in a whirlwind of change and adjustment. At Thornton Development, Maxwell implemented the promised reforms, establishing a community impact assessment protocol, creating a generous relocation assistance program for affected residents, and launching a foundation focused on affordable housing initiatives. The business press, initially skeptical, gradually began reporting on the Thornton transformation, a case study in how corporate values could evolve without sacrificing financial performance. Investors, after some initial wariness, responded positively to the company's increased transparency and reduced legal exposure. At home, the changes were equally profound. Emma thrived at school, her natural intelligence flourishing with stability and encouragement. Her musical talent developed rapidly under proper instruction, culminating in a winter recital where she performed her own composition, now titled Our Family Song, to enthusiastic applause. Oliver took his first steps in the conservatory, toddling unsteadily from Catherine's arms to Maxwell's waiting hands, while Emma played a triumphant chord on the piano. The moment, captured in a photograph that now sat on Maxwell's desk, encapsulated everything that had changed in his life. Harold, despite his illness, became a regular presence in their lives. Sunday dinners, occasional school events when his strength permitted, quiet conversations with Maxwell about business and family and the intersection of the two. The cancer progressed, but more slowly than doctors had predicted, giving them precious months to rebuild bridges long thought burned. Catherine, initially careful to maintain professional boundaries, gradually became part of their family circle. Her relationship with Maxwell deepened naturally, moving from friendship to something more with a pace that respected the children's needs and their own histories. On Christmas Eve, 6 months after the adoption, Maxwell stood in the doorway of the conservatory, watching as Emma played carols while Catherine and Oliver decorated a small tree placed near the piano. The mansion, once sterile in its perfection, now hummed with life. Toys scattered in unlikely places, children's artwork adorning refrigerator doors, the constant background music of family conversations. Harold, seated in a comfortable chair by the fire, caught Maxwell's eye. "Come sit, son, I've been thinking about something." Maxwell joined him, noting how the illness had accelerated in recent weeks. Harold's once imposing frame had grown frailer, his voice softer, though his mind remained sharp. "I've made some changes to my will," Harold said without preamble. "The majority of my Thornton development shares will go to you, of course, but I've established trusts for Emma and Oliver as well." Maxwell started to protest, but Harold raised a hand to stop him. "Let me finish. This isn't about money. God knows you have enough to provide for them. It's about belonging, about legacy. Those children are Thorntons now, in name and in spirit. They should have a stake in what we've built." The gesture, symbolic as much as financial, moved Maxwell deeply. "Thank you, Dad." Harold nodded, his gaze drifting to the children. "I built that company believing it was for you and Nathan. Then after we lost him," his voice faltered slightly, "I thought the business was all that mattered. I was wrong. The admission hung in the air between them, healing in its way." "You were doing the best you could," Maxwell said, understanding now in a way he couldn't have before becoming a parent himself. "As are you," Harold replied, a rare approval. That meant more than any business success ever had. Their conversation was interrupted by Emma, calling from the piano. "Dad, Grandpa, we need help with the star." The word Grandpa, still new, still precious, brought a smile to Harold's tired face. "Duty calls," he said, rising slowly. Later that night, after the children were asleep, with visions of Christmas morning dancing in their heads, Maxwell and Catherine stood in the kitchen, preparing for the next day's festivities. "I have something for you," Maxwell said, pulling a small box from his pocket. "An early Christmas gift." Catherine opened it to find a simple silver key. "What's this?" "A key to the front door," Maxwell said, suddenly nervous. "I thought, if you wanted, you might consider making your visits more permanent." Catherine's eyes widened with understanding. "Maxwell Thornton, are you asking me to move in with you?" "I'm asking for more than that," he admitted. "I'm asking if you might consider becoming part of this family, officially. Not right away, of course. When you're ready, when we're all ready." Catherine's smile was radiant as she stepped closer, her hands framing his face. "I thought successful businessmen were supposed to be direct in their proposals." Maxwell laughed softly. "I'm learning that family matters require a different approach than boardroom negotiations." "They do," Catherine agreed, her eyes serious. "Now, they require patience and communication and a willingness to grow together." She pressed the key back into his hand. "Ask me again in 3 months, when Emma and Oliver have had more time to adjust to their new life, when we've had more time to build our relationship away from the crisis that brought us together." Maxwell nodded, understanding and appreciating her thoughtfulness. 3 months it is. "In the meantime," Catherine continued, her arms sliding around his neck, "I'm quite happy with our current arrangement. Dinner dates, weekend visits, and..." The kiss that followed promised a future neither of them had imagined 6 months earlier. A future built not on corporate acquisitions or professional achievements, but on the foundation of family, of connection, of love rediscovered after years of absence. On Christmas morning, Maxwell awoke to the sound of excited footsteps in the hallway. Emma and Oliver, too thrilled to sleep any longer, burst into his room with all the exuberance of children on Christmas Day. "Dad, wake up! Santa came!" As Maxwell followed them downstairs, he marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. A rainy night, a desperate cry for help, a split-second decision to stop his car. These small actions had altered the course of all their lives. The living room was transformed by twinkling lights and carefully wrapped packages. Catherine and Harold were already there, sharing coffee by the fire, their faces warming at the children's excitement. Watching Emma help Oliver open his gifts, Maxwell felt a completeness he had thought forever lost after Nathan and Claire's passing. Different, yes, this new family could never replace what had been taken. But precious in its own right, a second chance he had never expected to receive. Later, as snow fell gently outside and the family gathered for Christmas dinner, Maxwell raised his glass in a toast. To new beginnings, he said, his gaze encompassing each person at the table: Emma, bright and resilient; Oliver, curious and thriving; Harold, present despite his illness; Catherine, her eyes reflecting the love he felt; and to the unexpected journeys that bring us exactly where we need to be. As glasses clinked and smiles were exchanged, Maxwell, Thornton understood with perfect clarity. The empire he had built of glass and steel would someday crumble, as all material things must. But this family